Hey, it's Jorge from brewbeeranddrinkit.com. Today I'm going to show you how to brew a Dunkelweizen recipe. Very simple. We have 5 pounds of German wheat malt. We have 2 pounds of German Vienna malt and 1.5 pounds of Munich. This is actually domestic Munich. I believe it's 10 Lovey Bond. So obviously you need to have at least 50% German wheat malt to, so it's considered a wheat beer. The Vienna malt here is supposed to add a little bit of that biscuity flavor to it. And then the Munich malt, here's the tricky part. Munich malt is going to give the beer a little bit of its color, but the darkness or the color of the malt, Munich 10 Lovey Bond, is not nearly enough to get our beer to where we need it to be. So most of the color is actually going to come from the actual brewing process. And one of the reasons why we don't want to overdo Munich malt in this beer is because it may intensify the maltiness a little too much, and it might start to fight with our yeast ester. So that's one thing to watch out for. It's one of the reasons why I kept it only at 1.5 pounds. So anyways, that's just how I brew it. I know some brewers may use a little bit more, but that's basically about as much as I'm going to use. So anyways, speaking of yeast esters, I'm going to be using Hefeweizen L yeast. This is White Labs WLP 300. Now, I was going to do a starter, mostly because I've been kind of lazy lately and haven't really been doing starters. On one note, I've been kind of studying and kind of taking note on how beers behave by underpitching and kind of figuring out what's that parameter, like how much is underpitching yeast and how much is not. So, but with this beer, I'm actually going to be doing no starter on purpose, mostly because I do want to have a lot of yeast growth to actually get a lot of good esters during the beginning of fermentation. So that's one of the reasons why I'm going straight from a vial. Usually Hefeweizen, or in this case this Dunkelweizen, I think straight from a vial is actually not a bad idea. So it's one of the exceptions to making a yeast starter. For hops, just 1 ounce of Czech Saaz hops. Like I mentioned in my German lager video, I really am liking the results of using aged hops. So notice how I have it in a little brown bag, and the reason for that is because it allows oxygen to go in, so that helps oxidize the hops. So these have been aging for about 3 months. There's absolutely no cheesy smell to it. I didn't get any cheesy smell on my previous batch, so everything's good. So 1 ounce Czech Saaz. In this case, we're looking at beta acids. 3.4 beta acids is what I'm looking at. So anyways, that's it. I'm gonna do a full decoction mash in this beer. So let's go ahead and get started. So I started by adding all my grains into my mash tun, and then I do my salt additions here. So I'm using reverse osmosis water. And what I did for salt additions, I ended up adding 1/4 teaspoon of gypsum salt, and then 1/2 teaspoon of calcium chloride. Now for mashing temperature, I went ahead and added 4 gallons of water at about 113 degrees. So my mashing temperature was right around 109 degrees. And so basically you add the water and stir everything up, make sure that your pH is within range and all of that. And then you're just going to let this sit for not very long. You're really just looking for everything to get mixed in well. So you'll see, everything you get extremely cloudy and whatnot. So just let it sit for about 5-10 minutes. So you can do your pH. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes for your pH to come into, for your pH to actually drop to where it needs to be. So after you do that, then you're going to start doing your first decoction. Now for the first decoction, what you want to do is pull about 1/3 of the grains. And so in this case, I'm basically going to use about 2 strainer. I'm going to pull 2 strainerfuls. So what I do is, like for the first one, I usually just let it drip for a little bit to drain most of the liquid. I'm using pretty much nothing but grains. So after I let that for about a minute or so, drop that into my pot where I'm going to do the decoction, and then I do the same thing with the second strainer although I don't let this one drain as much, so I do want a little bit of liquid to go in there. So, but as you can see, it's for the most part nothing but grains. So you pull out your first decoction, you're going to let your main mash resting separately, so you just cover that up. And then one thing I do with the first decoction is I add a little bit of water to avoid scorching. So it's not a whole lot of water, but it's just enough to keep the grains from sticking to the bottom of the pot. And this basically, the amount and I guess the consistency basically looks like oatmeal. So it's just enough water to keep from scorching. So what you want to do here, the important part on the first decoction is that you want to have the temperature be anywhere between 154 to 160 degrees works. The closer you get to 160, the better. I did about 150 degrees, and you want to do it for about 10 minutes. So that's really the key thing here. You want to do it for 10 minutes, and then you want to bring it to a boil. Now when you bring it to a boil, your first decoction is where the magic happens as far as the color on this beer. You want to almost think of it as if you were to be brewing a Scottish ale where you're boiling down the wort to a syrup-like consistency. It's kind of like what you're doing here. So when you're boiling your first decoction, you're going to see your grain get darker and darker and darker, and that's what you're looking for. You want this you want this to give you the color that you're looking for in the beer, and it's also where a lot of the flavor is developed in this beer. It's with the first decoction. So you'll see some foam kind of form up, kind of like your mini hot break here, and then you're gonna boil for at least, I would say at least 10 minutes. I did about 15 minutes on mine, and then at that point I basically got ready to transfer all to the main mash. So when you transfer, you're gonna smell a little bit of that caramel aroma, and if that's what you get, then that's how you know that you've done this right. You get a little bit of that melanoiding caramelly aroma from your first decoction. So anyways, once you add everything to the main mash, you really just need to stir enough for the temperature to be evenly distributed, and then start pulling your second decoction pretty much right away. For your second decoction, you want to even out as much wort and as much grain, so about half and half ratio, and I did about 40%. So the way I measured this, I had about 20 quarts of mash total. So by the time I pulled everything out, I basically pulled out 8 quarts. I was left with 12 quarts in the main mash and 8 quarts in my decoction pot. So again, I cover this up, let this rest. It should be at about a protein rest, somewhere around 120 to 130 degrees. And then your second decoction, same thing, you want to be in that high temperature, although for the second decoction, the way that you want to do it is you want to bring the temperature up slowly, so that this wort spends some time at the lower temperatures between 140 to 150, and then go up, and you're just going to see it go from milky, cloudy color to kind of like a muddy-ish, brownish color, except you can see how it clears up. So that's really what you're looking for. You're looking for it going from murky to kind of clearing up a bit. So again, spend about 10 minutes, below 160 degrees, bring it to a boil about 10 minutes, and then transfer everything to your main mash. And watch out for any face full of steams here. When you transfer to the main mash, again, you're going to just stir and make sure that the temperature is evenly distributed. Now, if you do this right, the temperature should be below 150 degrees. Mine was right at 150 degrees, so that's pretty much perfect. If it's below that, that's fine, as long as it's above 140 degrees. But it should be right around that range. And now this is really your main mash. You can basically brew this beer with just a double decoction like this. Now I let the beer sit for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then I started to do my third decoction. Now you can already see here how the wort is changing color, and it looks like a kind of like a muddy, very brownish kind of looking. That's kind of what you're looking for. Now for the third decoction, I'm basically going to be pulling mostly water. There'll be some grains in there as well, but it's going to be mostly wort. And like I said, you may want to skip this. Again, I like to do it just because it's going to add more melanoidin flavor, and it's going to help me darken up the wort a little bit. Not a whole lot with the third decoction. It's mostly the flavor development aspect of it. And the other thing is it's going to allow me to bring the temperature of the main mash to mash out temperature. So that's pretty much what it looks like. You can see it's kind of murky, not at all what a Hefeweizen looks like. So this is why this is a Dunkelweizen. And so for the third decoction, you just want to bring it to a boil. You don't need to spend any time at mashing temperatures. And so once you're done with that, 10 minutes or so, bring it back to the main mash, and that should bring your temperature, your mash to a mash out temperature about 165 degrees or so. So just stir up, make sure that you stop any enzyme activity, and then just cover and let sit long enough for it to for the grain bed to settle. Now at this point, and for this beer style, you can recirculate until you get clear wort out. However, if you want to brew this beer the way that it was brewed back in the day, from what I understand, you don't really need to filter out the beer. I guess the beer wasn't exactly visually appealing, so I'm assuming most brewers just didn't really recirculate much for this beer. I did a little bit, but I wasn't really as worried as I am with other beers. So that's really one thing that's going to help me give the beer the color that it needs. Also keeping in mind that I'm going to be kegging the beer and not bottling, so I won't have the yeast haze in the beer to cloud up the beer and darken up the beer a bit. So anyways, batch sparged and collected about 6 3/4 gallons, and then I started to bring this to a boil. And after this, everything's pretty standard. Really, this beer is made in the mash with the decoction mash. So anyways, I boiled this down to about just under 6.5 gallons, and then that's how I time it basically. And then after that point, I had about an hour left, and that's when I added my hops. Again, 1 full ounce of Czech Saaz hops. These were aged for 3 months. And that's pretty much it. Boil for 60 minutes, then start to cool down your beer. Now when you cool down your beer, I basically cool down to my yeast pitching temperature, fermentation temperature, which is, and this beer is going to be 65 degrees. And so one thing that I haven't really talked much about is aerating the wort. You know, I've tried splashing, I've tried a bunch of things. One thing that I've been trying that I haven't seen anyone do is basically what I'm doing here, which is when I'm transferring my beer to my carboy, I create an air pocket in my transferring hose, and you can see all the bubbles that form up. Now, I wasn't sure how well this was going to work, but apparently it works very well, and it's in a couple of from a couple of different perspectives. When I splash my wort, I used to create a lot of foam, and you know, well, the carboy can't really do the whole splashing thing, but even if you did, there would be too much foam forming up that it wouldn't really fit in the carboy. So this method keeps that foam from forming up. And then the other thing is, well, I mean, it seems to be getting enough oxygen to start my fermentations pretty well. So again, I pitched right from a vial. Like I said, I want some esters in this to form up in this beer, so I didn't want to do a yeast starter. And like I said, I'm gonna start this beer fermenting at 65 degrees, and then I'm gonna raise it up to just not a whole lot, maybe just to about 68 degrees, just to finish off the fermentation. And well, that's pretty much it. Stay tuned for the review video. You can see the woke up this morning to a nice ring of croissant bubbles already, you know, spitting out. So anyways, that's pretty much it. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. I'll see you guys next video.